A Night for a Week. "Brent, are you reading that book again?" asked my little sister Jane. I nodded but didn't say a word. I was busy imagining myself as the knight in the story. "What's so great about it?" she asked. I slipped the book into the pocket of my backpack. "It's about knights," I answered. "And knights were amazing. I know everything about them." We were on our way to night camp. My family was going to drop me off. Then I would get to stay there for almost a whole week. I couldn't wait. "Oh yeah?" said Jane. "What did they do that was so amazing?" "Well, they lived during a time called the Middle Ages," I said. "That was hundreds of years ago. They wore armor, used swords, and rode horses. Some even lived in castles." Jane smiled. "I like castles too," she said. "Let's play princes and princesses." "Not now," I said, turning to look out the window. As soon as we got to night camp, I hugged my family goodbye. Then I ran straight to the welcome tent. There were counselors dressed up like knights, and campers were walking around rows of tables. The tables had armor, helmets, and shields on them. It was so cool. "Are these really from the Middle Ages?" I asked one of the counselors. His night costume had a name tag with Evan written on it. Evan smiled. "No," he answered. "But they do look a lot like what real knights wore back then." "I guess," I answered, picking up a shield. "Except I'm pretty sure the shields were bigger back then, and shinier." Evan walked me to my cabin to drop off my bag. Then he took me to see the dining hall. There were long wooden tables and benches. The windows were made of small pieces of colored glass put together in patterns, and the walls were covered in framed pictures of castles and knights on horseback. I couldn't wait to eat my meals in there. "Are we going to eat roasted boar like knights did?" I asked Evan. The counselor laughed. "I don't think wild pig is on the menu," he said. "But the cook does make great meatloaf and banana cream pie." I frowned. I was pretty sure knights did not eat banana cream pie. Next, Evan took me past the playing field. "When do we get to see the contest with the long sticks?" I asked. "You know, the one where you try to knock someone off his horse?" "You mean jousting?" said Evan. "You won't be seeing that this week, but don't worry. There will be plenty of exciting things to do in the meantime." "By the way," Evan continued as we walked, "you sure do know a lot about knights." "I know everything about them," I answered proudly. When we got back to the welcome tent, it was almost full of campers. I walked over to a table that had different musical instruments on it. Just as I was picking up a funny-looking guitar, a boy came over to me. "Hi, I'm Will," he said. "Do you know how to play that thing?" "It's called a lute," I said. "I've read all about them, so I'm sure I can play it." I ran my hand down the strings. Twang! I ran my hand back up the strings. Twing! Some of the campers covered their ears. It sounded horrible. I tried plucking the strings one by one, but it hurt my fingers. My face felt warm as I put the lute back on the table. "Sorry," I said. Will laughed. "Don't worry about it," he said. Then he picked up 2 sticks and started to play the small drum that was on the table. All the campers groaned. His playing was even worse than mine. "Time to go to the dining hall, campers," called Evan. After supper, we all went back to our cabins. I laid down on my bunk and pulled out my book about knights. I wanted to be sure I remembered everything. The other campers read or talked until Evan flipped the lights off and on. That was the signal to be quiet. "Story time," he called. Evan sat on a chair in the middle of the room. "This is a story about a boy from the Middle Ages," he said. "His family was rich and important. They wanted him to become a knight when he grew up. Back then," Evan kept going, "boys left home when they were about 7 years old. They lived with another rich and important family while they learned how to become knights." I looked at the cover of the book Evan was holding. I'd read that one before. "Boys who were learning to be knights were called pages," I said. "The page in this story comes up against a lot of problems, but he doesn't give up. He works really hard and ends up becoming the best knight in the kingdom." The other campers looked at me. They didn't look too happy. "Now we know how the story ends," said one. Will called from his bunk. "I don't mind. Go on, Evan, keep reading." I looked at Will and smiled. When I woke up on Tuesday, I was excited to start the first full day of night camp. At breakfast, I heard Evan telling some campers more about the steps to becoming a knight. He told them that Pages had to learn how to sing, play musical instruments, and ride a horse. When Pages turned 14, Evan went on, they became squires. Then they learned how to use a sword, move around in armor, and... Don't forget, I interrupted, squires also had to help knights put on their armor. And they had to make sure the knight's sword stayed clean and shiny, and sharp. Evan took a bite of his toast and a gulp of orange juice. That's right, Brent, he said. And then finally, when they were 21 years old, squires would become knights. The campers kept listening while Evan talked about how knights had to show courage, respect, and loyalty. He told us that this way of behaving was called the Knight's Code of Honor. A knight was loyal to his king and to other knights, even if it meant he had to give up something he wanted for himself. After breakfast, we all went to the stables, where Evan matched each page with a horse. "Say hello to your new friend," he said to me. "Damsel will be your horse for the rest of the week. Isn't she beautiful?" I had never been on a horse before, but I'd read all about horseback riding. I was sure I'd be good at it. I walked right up to Damsel and patted her nose, but she snorted at me and shook her head from side to side. I took a step back. Evan grabbed an apple chunk from a bucket and tossed it to me. "Feeding Damsel apples is the fastest way to make friends with her," he said. "She loves them." I gave the apple chunk to Damsel. Then I took the rest of them from the bucket and gave her those too. I really wanted Damsel to like me. Will went over to the bucket next. "Hey, thanks for taking all the apples, Brent," he called. He was smiling at me, but the other campers weren't. After we'd groomed our horses, it was time to go on a ride. I put my foot in the stirrup and tried to climb up, but it was a lot harder than I thought. I tried again, but couldn't get my leg over Damsel's side. Evan ran over and boosted me into the saddle. "Isn't this great?" Will shouted. He was already on his horse. I wanted to answer him, but I was so scared that I couldn't talk. I was so high off the ground. Then Damsel started to walk. My body shifted back and forth. I felt like I was going to fall off. "Help!" I cried. "Something's wrong with my saddle." Evan ran back over and checked the straps on my saddle. "It might feel like you're slipping," he said, "but you're safe, I promise." "Try gripping the sides of your horse with your legs," Will added. I did what he said, but I still felt scared. Horseback riding seemed so easy for the pages in my night book. Why was it so hard for me? After breakfast on Wednesday, we had arts and crafts. Evan told us that in the Middle Ages, knights' shields had special designs on them. I already knew about these kinds of designs. "You mean a coat of arms?" I said, turning to the other campers. They were really important. They showed other people where a knight came from. "Brent is right again," said Evan. "And today you'll all be making your own coat of arms." He gave each of us a wooden shield, then put up a big chart on the wall. It had pictures of things that might be in a coat of arms, like animals, plants, and other symbols. Under each picture, you could read about what the symbol stood for. The chart also had a section that showed what different colors meant. "There is no right or wrong way to make your coat of arms," said Evan, "but I want you all to think carefully about your design. When you're done, we'll take a vote on which one we like the best. The winning coat of arms will be put on this year's camp t-shirt." I got right to work on my shield. I didn't bother to look at the chart because I already knew all about coats of arms. For the background, I picked my favorite color, green. Then I drew a big dragon in the middle and painted it black. I also painted a big yellow sun at the top. I knew my design was going to get the most votes. "Are you done already?" Will asked me. He was still studying the chart. He had not even started yet. I nodded, then decided to add a border around my shield too. When everyone was finished, Evan asked us to hold up our shields and talk about our designs. Will said that he picked blue for his background because it stood for truth and loyalty. "I picked a lion," he said, "because it stands for courage." Will's coat of arms got the most votes. The campers liked the way the symbols matched the knight's coat of honor. Truth, loyalty, and courage. My design didn't get a single vote. Will's face turned pink when he found out he had won. He didn't like all the attention. "I'm just glad we all get a camp t-shirt," he said. When I woke up the next day, my stomach hurt a little bit, but but I wasn't sure why. I felt a little better when I saw Evan at breakfast. He had a huge smile on his face. "Good morning, campers," he yelled, standing up. "I hope you all had a good night's sleep. You're going to need a lot of energy today. This morning, we'll go horseback riding. After lunch, we'll head to the field for night camp games." I wasn't looking forward to the horseback riding, and I wondered what the night camp games were. When I asked Evan, he said, "You're going to love them." I wasn't so sure. There was nothing in my book about night games. After lunch, we all gathered at the field. Evan explained that we'd be playing 5 games and earning points in each. The camper with the most points at the end would win a special prize. Evan led us to a corner of the field where 2 sticks were poking out of the ground. "The first game of the day is Royal Horseshoes," the counselor told us. "You'll each get 3 chances to hook your horseshoe around the stake. You'll get a point each time you do." The first 2 campers lined up and tossed their horseshoes, but they both missed. Then it was my turn. Plink! My horseshoe hit the stake and landed with a thud. I'd scored a point. I missed on my second toss, but I scored again on my third. Will gave me a high five. "You might not be the best at horseback riding," he joked, "but you're really good at horseshoe throwing." The next game, Evan announced, is Egg on a Silver Spoon. It was a knight's duty to protect the castle and to keep safe the important objects inside. So for this game, your goal is to protect your egg as you carry it across the field on a spoon. When Evan said go, we began to make our way across the field. I took a few quick steps, but my egg wobbled a little. I took a deep breath and straightened my back. I imagined myself as a noble knight moving calmly through a castle. Before I knew it, I'd made it across the field. "Way to go!" called Will. His egg had already dropped and broken. "I guess I'm better at eating eggs than I am at protecting them," he said. By the time we'd finished Jump the Moat and Capture the Crown, I was ahead of the other campers by 1 point. There was just 1 more game to go, Armor Obstacle Course. "Now you're really going to see what it felt like to be a knight," Evan declared. He dragged over boxes full of plastic armor. "What are you waiting for?" he shouted. "Put it on!" Will and I looked at each other and smiled. We ran toward one of the boxes. Suddenly, Will slipped and fell. "Ouch!" he cried, rubbing his ankle. "I think I slipped on some slimy raw egg." Evan ran over and bent down to look. "Does it hurt a lot?" he asked Will. Will nodded. "I think I need to go see the nurse." I looked at the boxes of armor, then out at the field, which had been set up with exciting obstacles. I took a deep breath. "I'll take him," I said. When we got to the first aid cabin, the nurse examined Will's ankle. "You won't be going anywhere for a while," she said. "That's a bad sprain." The nurse helped Will to a cot and placed 2 pillows under his foot. "I'll get some ice," she said. I could hear the other campers laughing outside. They must have started the obstacle course. Will frowned. "You still have a chance at winning the night camp games," he said. "Don't worry about me. Go get the prize." I nodded, but I didn't leave. I remembered how nice Will had been to me all week, even when the other campers were annoyed with me. I also thought about the knight's code of honor. I spotted a pair of crutches leaning against the wall. I picked one up and tapped Will on each shoulder. "I knight thee, Sir Will," I said in a serious voice. For the rest of the afternoon, Will and I told each other our favorite night stories. We drew pictures of castles and horses, and we played card games. When it was time for dinner, Evan brought us plates piled high with food. "Your parents are on their way to pick you up, Will," Evan said. "Oh, well," said Will. "At least I'm only missing 1 day of camp." Later as I left, Will waved from his cot. "See you next year, Sir Brent," he called. "See you next year," I said. I definitely wanted to come to night camp again. The next morning, I woke up early to pack. Then it was time for the big family breakfast in the dining hall. When I got there, I saw tables set with fancy plates and pots of flowers. There were big platters of sweet rolls, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit. Mom, Dad, and Jane waved at me from across the room. "Find your families and take a seat," called Evan. As we ate, I told my family all about my week at camp. Suddenly, Evan stood up. "I have a special announcement," he said. "Yesterday, we gave out the prize for the winner of the night camp games. This morning, I'd like to give a prize to a camper who showed true loyalty." Evan walked over and stood next to me. And that camper is Brent. Evan handed me a box with my very own armor. I couldn't believe it. My parents beamed at me. "Does that mean you're a knight now?" my little sister asked. "I'm not a knight yet," I answered, "but I'm learning to be one." "Does that mean you'll play princes and princesses with me in the car?" she asked. I smiled. A real knight would be kind. "How about princes, princesses, and knights?" I said.